I don't think there's really any secret to success. Just keep going. And it's that persistence. Find another way. If you are stuck in something, find a different way. Just keep banging on doors until you find the right solution around that.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating better businesses because life is too bloody short. I work with established business owners and their leadership teams to help them live their ideal entrepreneurial life using EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I use this podcast to bring on guests to share practical tips and tools about how EOS can help you in your business and your life to get more of what you want. Today's guest is not an EOS expert as such, but she has managed to appear on Shark Tank and get offered $1 million. As a new parent, she started her own business, and as a single mum, she grew that business to $9 million of revenue with 10 head office staff and more than 300 contractors. And she's also the creator of Time Boss, an AI-driven platform that provides a B2B software as a service scalable solution for service industries. She's going to share with us her journey, how she got on Shark Tank, some of the pitfalls she's had along the way, how she balanced that whole work and life kind of balance, and also how she's managed to really scale the business as she's now looking at entering into the US and the Canadian markets. Susan Toft is the CEO and founder of The Laundry Lady, and she's joining us today from Australia. Welcome to the show, Susan. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolute pleasure. I have been reading about you and I've been looking at all, your bio and what you have done, and it just amazes me. So you've gone from being a single mum who I guess was kind of looking for somewhere to support herself through looking after her two boys, to being on Shark Tank, to being a $9 million business and 10 staff, over 300 contractors throughout Australia and New Zealand. And I know you're now talking about launching into the US as well. So, wow, what a journey. Where do we start? Can you tell us a bit about how that all came about?
Yeah, it has been a really big, long journey. And, there's no straight line in business, I think, in business journeys. I have this slide that I show to investors that shows a bit of a roller coaster. And that's certainly what the journey has been like. So I actually started back in 2012. I was a new mum and I'd been working in a corporate career, working for Austrade and in international marketing. And I was really struggling with, my work-life balance and being a new mum, which I think a lot of, mums go through in particular when they have their kids and they've had a career. And so I wanted to do something really different and that, could give me some flexibility to be at home. And so I came up with this idea, walking past my spare room, seeing my own clothes piled high and thinking about how much I also needed a service like this. And so that was really where the idea came from, and jumped in and began The Laundry Lady. So in the very beginning, I was the original laundry lady. I went out and picked up the laundry in my local area and took it back to the customer the next day. And that was, such a good insight for me into how the business could work, how the model could work, what customers wanted, how to structure the pricing, scheduling, all of those sorts of things. And so, I had these big grand plans that I wanted to be able to scale the business and bring the same opportunity, particularly to other women out there who I thought, might be looking for the same kind of flexible business. But in the beginning, it was just me, just going out and doing the laundry. So, a really great insight on the ground that you could do years and years of market research and never get that kind of insight. So
I was actually going to say, you kind of built an MVP in some respects, right? I mean, that's usually just software terminology, but you built an MVP, you went out there, you trialed it. I'm guessing you learned as you went through that, what worked, what didn't work, how you could improve things before you actually tried to grow it.
Completely MVP. And then there's actually been a few phases of MVP, because then around 4 years after that, I got a small little $5,000 grant from government to create a digital platform. So before that, I just had a website and the phone number, and that was it. And then I got my $5,000 grant, and I went off to my designer and said, I want this Uber style platform and here's my budget. And he kind of laughed at me and said, you're not going to get that. Even mates rates is going to be like a good $50,000-$60,000 for what you're trying to do. And he said, go and find an off-the-shelf system. And that's exactly what we did. I went and researched every off-the-shelf scheduling payment system I could find, and found one called Timely, which a lot of salons use today still. And we used that off-the-shelf platform actually helped us grow to about 6 million in revenue. So we got a really long way using that, which was great because I never had any money to put into the business to be able to create my own tech platform. We definitely outgrew that quite a few years ago. And so we only really launched the platform about 12 months ago. And that's been really game changing for the business in terms of, giving us operational efficiencies and things like that. That's going to really help us with our future scale. But again, it was, having that MVP of using the off-the-shelf platform, gave me that insight into exactly what we needed for when we did come around to creating our own platform. And so then it was a lot cheaper and easier to get that off the ground because we already had kind of tested and knew exactly what we needed.
What worked, what didn't work. And again, it's another timely reminder, isn't it? Sometimes you don't have to invest that huge amount of money up front. Is get an MVP, see how it works, look for things that do work, things that don't work. And it's a bit like living in a home for a while before you do any renovations. Just understanding what it feels like to live there, what is going to work for us, where we would like to change things.
Yeah, exactly. I see a lot of people start the other way where they get, money and try and build this great platform and then they launch it and they don't even know what to do. Then, they don't know how to market and how to get customers or if customers even want what they're selling. And so I think, if you can find a way to do it, cheaply and like an MVP in the beginning, then that's going to really help you, get started and get moving with the business.
Perfect. So yeah, 2012 is when you first started it. So tell us a little bit about that journey from that very first day to becoming what you would call perhaps a real business in terms of it wasn't just a job for you, but you suddenly started employing people. Tell us a bit about that journey.
Yeah. So after I got that $5,000 grant and got that integrated system, I got my first few contractors on board. So I had about 4 contractors on board. And again, that was just, early stages, gave me the opportunity to learn how contractor model would work and if that would work for us and the types of people who would want to join. And, and it was very much what my vision had been in the beginning, like a lot of women who are looking for a flexible work from home business. And so, and it was really get them on board and then get them customers and the business sort of operated a little bit like that for another good few years. And I became a single mum and I had to go back to work full time for a period within that because I needed extra income to get myself back on track. And then it was really when COVID hit that gave me the opportunity to come back to the business. So I was a little bit stuck in that, I knew if I came back to it, it would really grow. And I had all the, kind of foundations in place, but I couldn't commit to leaving paid income and coming back to the business. And so COVID was a little bit of the icing on the cake for me, that it did give me that opportunity to come back and commit to it full time. And everything, all of the growth and everything that's happened has really been in the last 4 or 5 years since COVID. So that was, me committing to the business, getting my first staff member in head office. And I think we were about 20 or so contractors at that point in time. And then every year it's just been growing those contractor teams and growing our head office team. So now our head office team, there's 10 of us and we support just over 300 contractors. And, we've really just focused on getting the contractor, getting them customers and just continuing to repeat that in all different locations.
Rinse and repeat, yeah.
Rinse and repeat, yeah.
Excellent. So why the contractor model? I'm kind of interested to know, why did you go down that route rather than an employee route?
Yeah, so I actually in the beginning thought it would be a franchise model, but in Australia, franchising is quite complex in terms of, getting it set up. It's very expensive. I remember I only had the $5,000 budget, so it was just never going to happen for me that way. And there was a lot of things that were just starting to happen around contractor models like Uber that I, was looking at and thinking, well, that could work. I can see how that could work. And I was also involved in certain things like that. Like I was selling Thermomix, and Thermomix has a contractor model like that. And I think the flexibility that that contractor model could provide was really aligned with what our values were. And our values have been very strong right from the beginning, because it was always about creating flexibility, both for our contractors who are joining us, but also for our customers who we're helping get their laundry done. And I think staying true to those values right throughout has been a really important part of the journey. So yeah, the contractor model kind of presented itself and aligned to what those values were. So, that's what we've done. And that's certainly got more complex, because there's a lot of changes around employee versus contractor law and things like that in all different countries. But we give, so much flexibility to our contractors in the way that they work, that contractor model still really fits for
They're
that.
definitely not employees. Okay, that's cool. You just mentioned values. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on that. So as an EOS implementer, it's one of the things we talk about with our clients is being really strong about who you are, and therefore which people actually fit your organization, which people don't fit your organization. Did you have a strong sense of that right from the beginning, what those values would be?
Yeah, because I think the values were really about my own life and, where I was at, which was just that struggle of work-life balance and, needing to have income, but also needing to be at home so I could pick up my son from school and all of those sorts of things. And it's really, really hard, even in workplaces where they say they're flexible, they're often not. It's hard to get time off to be there for your kids. And, when they're young, that stuff's really important. Well, I've got a teenager now, it's even more important. And, and this is, pre-COVID as well, when there was no working from home and all of those sorts of things. So, it was very, very much really creating that flexibility for our contractors and for our customers, and bringing that into our values. And, we've stopped and rethought our values along the way as we've grown, and it still just comes back to that. It's just still such an important part of it. Our contractors are not joining us because they love doing laundry. They're joining us because they want that flexibility. They want to be able to work from home, and they might have kids that they're looking after, or elderly parents that they're looking after, or whatever it is. And we give them so much freedom that, that they can work at night if they want to, they can work in the day. They've basically got a 24-hour window to get the laundry done and get it back to the customer, and they can be earning as little or as much as they want. So, they're earning anywhere between $300 and $3,000 per week, depending on, where they're at. And some of them might start just wanting to earn that little bit and then go, oh, hopefully this is great. I can fit this around my life and it's easier. And then they increase that and we'll do more and more work. So we're really feel very proud that we have that model available to them, and that it does align to those values. So, I think it's so important for businesses to understand that about who they are, and keep checking in. Is that still who you are?
Yeah, because it can change over time, that's for sure. So in terms of when you're looking to employ somebody as a contractor, is there a particular process that you go through to make sure they are the right person and they actually fully understand what the role is about and what they need to do?
Yeah, so we have a whole recruitment process, and we've tried to automate that as much as possible so that we can, bring people in at scale. Particularly like when we go to the US, we want to be able to really do that at a much bigger, faster scale. So we've got that, a whole process, and so they will watch videos and read information packs and all of those sorts of things, and it really strongly tells them about our values, as well as, what they can earn and how the model will work and all of those sorts of things. So they go through all of that before we onboard them, and offer them the position. Also really comes down to location. So, because they're working from their own home. So, we don't want to have too many people in one area. We want to be able to help them all get to the capacity that they want us to get to. So we, really carefully manage that in our head office team to make sure that we're, constantly looking at the capacity versus demand, and meeting that in the middle.
Beautiful. And so from a branding point of view, it's called the Laundry Lady, but you don't just employ ladies, do you?
No, and we have the Laundry Lad brand as well. So yes, he's our cute little brand that we also have. So it is predominantly women. We have probably around 80 to 90% of our contractors are female, But then there's a lot who also might work with their husband, or they, or their kids or family members, or whoever it is. So it's, a really flexible business for all kinds of different people. And we're certainly, attracting more men to the business as well. So, it started with the original laundry lady, which was me. And now we're, a brand that's really grown from that.
And because you've got 300 plus contractors, that's a lot. It's going to get even bigger when you go to the US, right? I imagine that's going to almost exponentially scale. How do you ensure that they still represent your brand? Like what measures or what systems do you have in place to ensure that they're actually delivering on what the laundry lady or the laundry lad promises to the customers?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that we do, and there's lots of things that we'll be adding soon as well that will help us with that. So some of the things are looking at key data. So from the data, we know that we have a very high recurring rate. So in fact, over 80% of our customers have a weekly or fortnightly service, and 95% of them will use us more than once. So we know that's our company average, and we can look at data like that. And if people are dropping way below that, then perhaps there might be an issue that we need to look into. We certainly ask our customers, and our customers will tell us if there is an issue, and that's usually the best way. And we'll soon be building some more feedback models into our platform as well to get, really instant kind of feedback around that we can use to manage. We have a support team who are managing our contractors on a daily basis, and really helping them with anything that they need around supporting their business and supporting them. So yeah, so it's definitely, and it will get even more challenging as we get a lot more contractors. Like we've got 300 at the moment. We're forecasting that just within Australia and New Zealand, we'll get to about 10 times that in the next 4 or 5 years. And then obviously US will be a whole nother game. So US and Canada is the areas that we're looking at, and that will, really change the business dynamic, I think, as we grow into those. But we've got so much good, foundations that we've been able to develop from the way that we've grown and the way that we've built the business that can really help us within those new markets.
Beautiful. Well, I tell you what's been the biggest challenge that you've had in growing the business? Like if you think back over the years, what do you reckon was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Look, it's always money and people. So I think, on the money side, like this business has been completely bootstrapped. I never had anything to put in other than that nice little $5,000 grant in the beginning. I never had any money that I could put into the business. And that was really why it took so long to get to the stage of having our own tech platform and things like that. At the moment, we're trying to raise investment so that we can, really speed things up in terms of the way that we grow the business. But that's been a constant challenge all the way along, because when you are just growing from your own profits, then, you're reinvesting all of those profits back in. As a service business, we're very low gross profit margins. So we have to, be very careful with very lean in how we operate. And so, just managing that as you grow is definitely a challenge. And I think anyone in business should go and do an accounting degree. I think everyone should be taught that at school rather than the maths that they get taught. So, and then obviously people, and we're a very people-centric business, but, as you grow, you have more people come into the business, more HR issues to manage, finding the right people, keeping them, all of those sorts of things is super tough. And again, for me, it's just always really come back to values. And I find that if I can be really aligned to those values, then it attracts people into our team who are aligned to those values. And, so even in our head office team, flexibility is a really high priority. My staff don't need to ask for time off if they need it to go to something at school or anything like that, and they have a lot of flexibility in terms of working from home and being hybrid and all of those sorts of things as well, as employees. And so, that is really important to us to, and I think that attracts staff who are much more aligned to the business and stick around and all of those sorts of things. But yeah, it's definitely, always a challenge growing a team and managing a team. And, and I think also as a leader, you've got to recognize what you're good at and what you're not. And, I certainly find that I can't be involved in that day-to-day operations anymore. And I can't be involved in managing all the people anymore. With 300 contractors, that would just, I'd never sleep. So, it's really been about bringing in people that I can empower to be able to, make those decisions and manage those people so that I can step into the next phase of development of the business.
We call it delegate and elevate. It's really important, I think, as you grow. I know I work with a VA company where they were all contractors. And so Justine, as the owner, had got 50, 60 contractors working with her, and she was trying to do everything herself. And it just wasn't working because at the end of the day, as you said, as you grow, it just becomes impossible. And what we we realized as we worked through with her, there were certain things that, she could do, but it wasn't things she loved doing. It wasn't things she was great at doing. And so then you go, right, okay, so then what could we have as a role that could take away that stuff that you're not so good at, that you don't love or don't like, and give that to somebody else. And once she started forming a leadership team, it actually changed the entire way the business was run, because suddenly it wasn't one person trying to herdle the cats and get things going. She had a team that was supporting her, and they were doing what they loved and what they were great at. Therefore, the team as a whole was just on fire.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I think people get really, that we're all very attached to our businesses. They're our babies. We've grown them, and it's hard to let go of some of those things. I think I'm actually quite good at letting go of it, maybe too good. And then I worry, am I let go of too much? But, for me, my background is marketing and growth, and that's really what I'm very good at. And, when you're running a business compared to when I was in a career, I'm better at different things as well. So, I was quite good at managing people and all of those sorts of things then. But now when you're trying to do that as well as manage your budgets and, pay everything on time and do run every part of the business, like you tend to not be good at some things. So, I always have just got to a point where I've thought, what am I spending my most of my time on at the moment? And that's the next role. So in fact, even as a marketing background, my first hire was a marketing person, because I recognized that, doing social media takes so much time, and even though that was what I had the skills in and could do, it wasn't a good use of my time. And so bringing someone in to manage that, really, really helped for me to be able to focus on the next things and the next things. And so I just keep handing over the bit that I don't like.
I love it. I actually also come from a marketing background too, and I do any of my own marketing these days, because the same sort of thing. It's like, you've got to look at where do you really add the most value? And I think a really important point that you said there is, what you were doing in your corporate world may not be what you actually really excel at. So I think when I was in corporate world, I was a GM for a company that had 220 staff, and really good at holding them all accountable and having their measurables, and really, being a great leader and manager. But in my own business, it's quite different, because I don't know what changes, but suddenly you realize there are other things where you actually had a whole lot more value. And so those things aren't as important anymore. And also, I think as your own business and you're the owner of business, it's really more difficult to sometimes have those difficult conversations and hold people accountable. So I always say to people, if you're going to be if you can, one of the first hires you should have is somebody who can actually take care of all that people stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me about Shark Tank. I'm really keen to hear. How did you get onto Shark Tank? How did it go? What were the lessons you learned from that?
Yeah, so we were on Shark Tank in 2023, so just about a year and a half ago it aired. So the Shark Tank had stopped showing since before COVID, and then and that was going to be the first year that it had come back, and all new sharks. And so we just saw the ad for it, and it had always been a dream to go on Shark Tank. I didn't think it through too much. I just applied, which was probably quite good. If I'd had too much time to think about it, I might have talked myself out of it. But, look, I think when you are in business, you are not in business to not tell anyone about it. Like, you are there to tell everyone about it as much as possible. You have to, get over yourself if you are, scared to do that, because no one's going to know about your business if you're not out there, spruiking it all of the time. And so, applying for it was just another part of our marketing strategy. And then, and then it all happened very quickly. We got accepted. A couple of weeks later, I was flying to Sydney to go and film the show and giving them set designs and all sorts of things like that. And so I went on. It was the first time I'd ever done a pitch, which is a really great idea on national TV. I was terribly sick and I had very bad tonsillitis. But I knew I just had to get through it. And so you go in and you have to stand on this circle and you hear this music and your heart's in your throat. And then you stand there for a couple of minutes and then go into your 2 or 3 minute pitch. And although I was so nervous just to get that pitch right, because I thought if I stuff it up, that's what they will play over and over again. And I hadn't been getting it great that morning, but I did it perfectly. And then it just went straight into questions, which was the most intense, full on thing. But actually, I that was the point where I actually relaxed and forgot the cameras were there because, I know my business and I'm passionate about it and I know my numbers and I was excited to tell people about it. So, but it's quite full on. They're all shouting over each other and all of that sort of thing. So I did all of the questions and then got an offer from Robert Hajavik of the biggest ever offer on Australian TV. So $1 million offer. And so, yeah, but, it was never really about chasing the investment for us. It was more just about the marketing exposure, and the marketing exposure has been gold for us. You have no idea how much power there is in those words of as seen on Shark Tank. We get so many more clicks and all of that in our ads whenever we have that playing. We've got a whole lot of reels of famous people saying very nice things about our business. Thank goodness they said nice things. So, that's all testimonials that we can use in our recruitment interviews. We still get people, even 18 months later turning up to interview and talking about it. So it increased our application for contractors by about 5 times immediately after. And we saw that continue for quite a while. So, it was just a great exposure for the business and everyone asked me about it still. And so, it's definitely a great way to just kind of get your business name out there.
Certainly shows tenacity going on there when you've got tonsillitis, and I know what effect that can have on your brain as well. The brain turns to mush. But I think you made a really valid point there as well, as I actually, you should know your business numbers. You should know what you're talking about, which means actually the questions are the easiest part. It's the pitch that can be a bit challenging.
Yeah. And I think that's really important no matter what you're doing in your business, because you're always going to be talking to a bank or talking to a supplier or a potential partner. And if you don't know that off the top of your head, then it makes you look silly. So you've got to really know that and know that well and be ready to talk about it at any point in time. So, yeah.
So did you get the investment or not?
Well, I can't actually say, but we are chasing investment at the moment. So we are raising for the first time at the moment, and that will just really help us to accelerate our growth. But we have come a really long way without any kind of investment. So, I think we will continue to grow and into lots of new markets, whether we have investment or not.
I think the bootstrapping thing is actually a really interesting thing. I think a lot of people go into business and they immediately think they're going to get investment. And I actually have a girlfriend who wrote a book on bootstrapping over here in New Zealand, Sarah Perry, and she talks about the fact that, she had opportunity to bring other people on board, but she really wanted to, I suppose, maintain a bit of control, because when you actually get investment, it doesn't come with no strings attached. It comes usually with some quite strong personalities, have some quite strong ideas. And the bootstrapping thing enabled her to kind of keep control for a period of time. But it also meant that you looked at every single dollar you spent, because I'm sure you would have been in the same situation where you're looking at kind of going, if I spend this dollar, I probably can't spend it here. So which one provides the best return on investment? How do I best do that? Whereas if you're throwing a whole bunch of money, which I've seen through the ice house, working at the ice house where businesses get thrown a lot of money, it actually makes it a little bit easier. And so sometimes you're not quite as, what's the right word? Not quite as focused on what it's going to be the return for that investment. Would you say that's fair from your journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had to count every dollar, every step of the way and be very creative in the way that I accessed any money to be able to do anything. As a single mum, trying to get a credit card to run a business is very impossible to do when you are just a small business. Even now, it's still difficult because, banks don't look at business owners in the same way that they look at employees. So, it's so tough. You've got to count every dollar. And I think that's a really good mentality to have, whether you have investment or not. And we certainly still have that in our bootstrapping and trying to, always look for efficiencies in every single thing, because every dollar counts and every every extra dollar we can get is a dollar we can put into our marketing to get, more customers for our contractors. And so, we're really like very focused on that all of the time. It certainly would be nice to be on the other side of that for a while, but if not, then we'll just continue bootstrapping. You can get a long way.
You can. And I think also, though, if nothing else, by the time you do get investment, which I'm sure that you will have a very, very different mentality. So when I actually had my own businesses very early on, then I went into corporate world. And by the time I got into corporate world, I treated every single dollar like it was my own because I'd run my own business. I knew what it meant. I knew what it, that you had to look after the dollars and the cents. And then it actually took me a long way in the corporate career as well, because all of a sudden there was somebody who actually genuinely cared. I'd go, we're spending money on that. Why are we doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Whereas a lot of corporate people who've always been corporate will actually they've had big budgets. They don't think about how they spend it. So I think if nothing else, it gives you a really good baseline to be looking at everything in a very objective way rather than a bit of a subjective way.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
I'm really keen because you are a marketer. And obviously the industry that you're in, it's probably pretty easy to copy. And I would suggest it's almost on the point of being commoditized in terms of it is just a service that anybody could actually do. How do you differentiate yourself?
Our brand, for sure, 100%. It's just really focusing on our brand and making sure that, as I talked about before, the values are very strong in our brand. I'm a big part of that brand because of my story. So people really resonate with my story of why I started, being a new mum and then later being a single mum and, and having to, have a business that I could have flexibility. And so we really push that so hard in our marketing, and that's what really attracts people. And, that's hard to do well. And I think that's something that we've been really, really good at. And I don't even give it enough credit sometimes because marketing just sort of, is a natural thing to me and something that we just do and has always been a priority and a focus for us. But, when I step back and with all the questions that we've had from potential investors in the last year and, and that is something that a lot of them will ask us. And it's really, because it's so hard to actually break down the real tangible benefits of that marketing. But investing in that and investing in a really solid brand that encompasses your values, and making sure that's in everything that you do, I think is what's really helped us to get to where we are.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now you have got two sons, they're 15 and 10 now, is that right?
Yes, 15 is a lot.
I saw that you said that, that the things you're most proud of, but also some of the biggest challenges for you. Are the boys involved in the business at all, or have they shown any interest?
So not really much. I have a very pink branded car, and it's very embarrassing for my teenager to be dropped at school in his pink car. And in fact, he at the moment in school is doing a Shark Tank pitch, and he hasn't told his teacher or anyone in his class about that his mum was on Shark Tank. And I'm like, can I run in and tell your teacher? What let me? So yeah, mum's a little bit embarrassing at the moment for her to really care. But they do know, like, because we have such a flexible, open business, like we would bring the kids into the head office in school holidays and things like that. I don't tend to do that too much anymore because they're more trouble than they're to bring in there. But they and my son's been helping out in the warehouse sometimes, helping pack the starter kits and things like that. I think now that he's 15, he's starting to really understand a lot more about what the business is about. But it was certainly exciting for them to see mum on Shark Tank, and to be able to see that. And because and my eldest always tells me how terrible I am at doing laundry as well, which is kind of funny. So I'm like, that's laundry pays our bills. But anyway.
That's awesome. Okay, that's wow. I'd be interested to see if they do actually want to get involved. I do a lot of work with family businesses, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and that's absolutely fine. But it'll be interesting to see how they feel about it as they get a little bit older, I suppose, and finish up school.
He does like to critique our marketing. I tell you what, my marketing manager gets very upset because he thinks that he knows TikTok better than anyone because he's 15, and he probably does.
Mm-hmm.
So he likes to critique us about that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the future does hold. Obviously, expansion plans are pretty good. Hopefully, you get an investor on board, which will help. In terms of people listening in who are listening to your story and going, wow, that's amazing. what would be the kind of the 3 top tips or tools that you might give them that they could go away and action if they're, I don't know, maybe feeling a bit stuck? Because I must admit, having gone through a couple of businesses myself where I bootstrapped it, there are times when it's really tough, right? And there's times when you know you really want to do something, but maybe you can't afford it, or you get offered opportunities that you think, I'd like to take advantage of that, but it's not the right time. So for people who are kind of sitting there, perhaps in that kind of thing, or even just thinking about expanding or starting a business, what would be your top tips or tools?
Yeah, so I'd say the first one is to just get started or keep moving, keep going. I don't think there's really any secret to success. I don't think there's any secret to why some people do better than others, other than that they just keep going, and it's that persistence. Find another way. If you are stuck in something, find a different way. Just keep banging on doors until you find the right solution around that. And sometimes it's okay to take some time out as well, I think, when you are feeling a little bit like that. But, I always say just keep swimming. And that's really, what's kept me going through all the business. Again, it really has come back to values. And so I think getting true to your values is something that's really important, because that has kept me going a lot in times where I've thought, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. But remembering, all these contractors who joined us because they've got these same values, and want that flexible business, and the fact that we can provide that to them, that's something that does drive me and keep me going. So understanding your values and what they are and how they align, I think, is really important. Again, I would say, talking about the MVP, like, don't think that things have to be perfect in the beginning. I heard someone say the other day, progress, not perfection. And I think that's so true, because you can get really caught up in, trying to perfect something, and then you would never make any progress. So just get in and get it to a workable level. There's still so many things in our booking platform that, could be improved. And I know that, and I'm very conscious of that all of the time. But, we focused on what's going to be a workable solution, what's going to get us to the next stage. And we can come back to those other things later when we have money to do so. And, I think I just read, so I'm not a very disciplined type of person, and I'm a little bit disorganized, and I hate mornings. But I just read at the start of the year, the 5 a.m. Club, and by Robin Sharma. And so I've been getting up at 5 a.m. and doing a workout every morning, which is very, very unlike me. And I have to say that's been really game changing for me this year, because it's just made me more motivated, made me have a clearer head by the time I start. It just got rid of that I'm always in a rush kind of feeling, because I just feel a lot more calmness in the morning as a result of that. So, if you can incorporate something like that into your life, I think that's a good strategy to have. It certainly is a lot healthier than past strategies I've had. So yeah, so I think, is that 3? Have I said 3?
I think you said 4 or more. That's great. Now that's cool.
I can keep going forever.
You would obviously have learned a lot through it. It's interesting, the morning club thing, because I was never a morning person in my early days, and particularly not when I was working in corporate. I was definitely a morning person, but I think for the last 15 years, I've definitely been an early morning person. And I think you're right. It's like getting up. We go for a dog walk. I do a gym session 3 times a week, and just having, by the time I get to 7 o'clock in the morning, I feel like I've always done half my day. But it means that I'm clear for the rest of the day, which I think is really helpful. And I notice when I don't do it, I notice if I do decide I want to have a sleep, and it does really affect the way that you feel for the rest of the day. So I would highly recommend that early mornings can be a blessing as opposed to a challenge.
Yeah, it was definitely a struggle to get started with it. And the book is really good at talking about, the how you go through those struggles, how change can be very messy at the beginning, and all of those sorts of things, and how to get around that. And that gave me some really good strategies to get through it. And, I definitely feel like that. Like I don't feel good if I haven't done it. So I'm making sure I'm doing it at least on every weekday, and trying to do it on weekends as well where I can. And I think it's also just made me calmer with the kids in the mornings, because mornings are always stressful, trying to get them, 2 of them off to different places, and and juggle work and everything at the same time. So I'm definitely feeling like my stress levels in the morning have reduced greatly from it. But yeah,
Good.
hopefully I can keep it up. Let's
I
check
hope
in
so.
again
Yeah,
this
let's
time
do,
next
because
year.
yeah, absolutely, because it certainly it does become just the norm. Like I actually wake up naturally now at that time without even thinking about it. The other thing I just want to make point of is, you talked about, is there a magic formula? There isn't a magic formula in business. I think sometimes consistency, tenacity, just showing up, and as you said, always taking a step forward. And sometimes it feels like you take a step forward and then you take 2 steps back, but that's okay as long as you take the next step forward. If you keep taking the steps forward, you're eventually going to get there. But also knowing when you are stuck. So, be able to reach out for help and kind of go, hey, look, I am stuck. And I'm assuming you have good peers, good people in your head office you can actually talk to when things are getting a bit difficult.
Yeah, and certainly, going through investment raising, I feel like I've had every mentor coming out of everywhere trying to give advice, and that can sometimes be a bit much as well. It's like when you become a new mum and everyone wants to give you parenting advice, and at the end of the day, you've got to trust your gut and go with that. But yeah, sometimes it can just be like going to a networking event and talking to some other businesses over a glass of wine that can make you just snap out of whatever, thing you've been stuck in for a while. And doing those sorts of things because yeah, there's, there is no secret. You just got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And, persistence is the key to success, they say. So, you just got to do that.
Progress, not perfection. Just keep taking that step forward. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Hey, Susan, if people would like to find out more about what you're up to, where could they get hold of you?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, laundrylady.com.au, or in New Zealand, laundrylady.co.nz, and find out about our services. There's a join the team page for a contractor if anyone's interested in becoming a contractor. Our socials, you'll find lots of information there. And if you want to connect with me personally, then LinkedIn, you can find me there. So lots of different information online, and yeah, make sure you go and check out our services, because if you are in business yourself, you probably need a bit of time back to yourself. So we can help you get on top of your laundry at least and give you some time there. So that was my other tip I should have mentioned is outsource.
Oh,
Outsource as
yeah.
much as you can.
I completely agree. We talk about delegate and elevate. We talk about, you either delegate to somebody else in the team or you outsource it, or sometimes you can automate it, sometimes you stop it. And I have to say, laundry is, the bane of my life. I don't know how. There's only 2 of us in our household, but I don't know how we get through so much washing. Once you've got children and everything else, it's even worse. So
It's never ending.
never ending. Yeah, I love it.
Well, you can now book our services and check it out.
Absolutely, I will. Hey, Susan, look, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best with your investment raising and breaking into other markets.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.